The first issue that we're going to look at is the incorrect connection graphics position. So this issue does not occur in versions of OpenRoads Designer prior to 2023. It has been fixed for OpenRoads Designer 2024. It only affects nodes with one 3D cell, for example, an end wall. It does not affect nodes with two 3D cells, for example, a catch basin or a manhole. It only occurs if the reference elevation is a surface, so it doesn't occur if you type in an elevation for the end wall, and it also only occurs if use slope of surface is set to true. Now you can still use a surface to define the elevation of the node. And finally, it only affects the graphics, it does not affect the hydraulic results. So an example of the effect is shown in the picture on the right here, where this conduit, which might for example be a ditch coming out of the end wall, the incorrect connection graphic position means that the conduit is not correctly located at the end of the end wall. So to mitigate the effect of this issue, you can set the use slope of surface option to false, and you can do this either in the properties of the feature definition before you place the end wall, or you can do it in the properties of the end wall after it has been placed. You can also consider setting the match slope of conduit option to true so that the slope of the end wall will match the slope of the conduit and the 3D model will look better. So let's see this in action. This is OpenRoads Designer 2023. I'm going to start by placing an inlet. I'm being prompted to select the reference element, so I'm going to pick a terrain model. And I'm just going to place my inlet like that. Now I'm going to select an end wall. So I'm again using the terrain model as the elevation reference, and I'll place it. Now if we look at the properties of this end wall, we can see that use slope of surface is set to true. Now that setting comes from the feature definition. And because I've used a terrain model as the elevation reference and use slope of surface is set to true, in OpenRoads Designer 2023, we see an issue where the connection graphics are in the wrong place. The effect of that, if I place a conduit, I can correctly locate the start of the conduit on the connection regions for my inlet, but if I come down to the end wall, it wants to snap the end of the conduit to this incorrect location. If I change the use slope of surface setting from true to false, that will correct the position of the connection graphic so that now when I run the place conduit command, I can correctly locate both the start and the end of the conduit relative to the two nodes. I can also use the match slope of conduit option, changing that to true so that the slope of the end wall matches the slope of the conduit to make the 3D model more realistic. So the issue with the incorrect connection graphic positions only affects nodes that have a single cell in 3D, and only if they use a surface as the elevation reference, and only if use slope of surface is set to true. So the inlet here uses two 3D cells, so that is not affected. The second issue that we'll look at is whether a node or its connection graphics are selected when you pick. So the effect of this issue is that if you accidentally pick the connection graphic when you're trying to pick the node, then the position of a connected conduit might not update correctly. Now this occurs in all versions of Open Roads Designer, so 2023, 10, 12 and so on. Again, it has been fixed for Open Roads Designer 2024. Now it only occurs if the connection graphics are outside the extents of the plan cell and the node is rotated after it has been placed. So the pictures on the right hand side here try to demonstrate this. So this top picture is showing the situation before we rotate the node. So in the plan cell I have this cyan box, perhaps representing the cover of a chamber. And then I have these connection graphics, in this case connection regions. Now notice that they are outside the extents of the plan cell. Now when you try to pick any graphical element, Open Roads Designer constructs a bounding box around it to identify whether or not the pick is selecting that element or another adjacent element. Now you don't see this bounding box in the software when you're using it, but it helps me to demonstrate the issue. So when you rotate the node, what's happening is that the cell is rotated and the connection graphics are rotated, but the bounding box at the moment is not rotated. So we can now see that part of the graphics for the connection regions in this case are outside the extents of the bounding box. Because the bounding box isn't rotated and part of the connection graphics are outside of it, depending on where you pick, you might get either the node or one of the connection graphics. So in the picture here I'm trying to demonstrate that any pick within the extents of the bounding box will correctly select the node. If you pick on one of the connection graphics outside the extent of the bounding box, it will only select that connection graphic, not the node. So if you accidentally do this, what you can do is just deselect the connection graphic, then select the node, and the best way to do that is to pick a graphic from the plan cell, and then if you adjust the rotation of the node slightly, that will synchronize the connection graphics back to the node, and therefore any connected conduits are synchronized back to the node as well. This issue is much less likely to occur if the graphics for the plan cell include some sort of representation of the size of the vault. So the connection graphics quite often are located on the inner walls of the vault or the chamber. So if the plan cell includes some sort of representation of the outside of the chamber, then the connection graphics will be inside the extents of the plan cell, and that makes the issue less likely to occur. Also, the connection graphics are normally construction class elements, and you can turn off the display of construction class elements in View Attributes. It does not affect locating conduits on the nodes, but if the connection graphics are turned off in the display of the view, then you can't pick them and therefore the problem can't occur.